Welcome to the first episode of Bicep Series. We're going to create a storage account using Bicep. But before we do, let's chat about infrastructure as code. What is it and the benefits? Let's talk about Azure Resource Manager. And let's talk about Bicep and the benefits behind it. And lastly, we'll create a storage account and a container using Bicep, which is the main goal of this chat. What is infrastructure as code and why do we need it? Infrastructure as code is managing and provisioning of infrastructure through code instead of manual processes. Why do we need it? Speed. We can deploy our infrastructure in an automated way. Consistency. Manually configuring environments can lead to errors and mismatch between our environments like test, UAT, and prod. Infrastructure as code gives us the confidence that our environment are consistent. Productivity allows engineers to spin up infrastructure without the dependency on other teams. And lastly, accountability. With source control in place, we can rely on a single source of truth with audits of who did what and when did they do it. These are not the only benefits of infrastructure as code, but these are the four that are worth mentioning. Let's get into Azure. Azure Resource Manager. It is a deployment and management service for Azure. It provides a layer that enables you to create and update, delete resources in your Azure account. And as we continue to talk about Azure Resource Manager or we'll talk about templates, which are JSON files that define resources you need to deploy for your solution. As you can see on this picture, there are multiple ways to deploy Azure services, but all roads leads to Azure Resource Manager to deploy services. Now into Bicep. And Bicep sounds cool. I don't know who came up with the name, but I like it. Maybe in future we'll have Tricep. Who knows? What is Bicep? It's a domain-specific language or DSL that uses declarative syntax to deploy Azure resources. The main goal is to simplify the deployment by removing the complexity we see in templates. During the deployment, the Bicep code is converted into template and fired into Azure Resource Manager, as you can see on the picture. We have an option of compiling the Bicep into the template and then deploying it using the multiple mechanisms we saw before, but it's not worth it. Why Bicep and why do we need it? Bicep promises simple syntax to reduce the complexity you find in templates. It's definitely easier to read compared to what I've seen with templates. Bicep promises the reuse of the modules. So instead of having one long file, we can break code into multiple files and we can reuse some of the modules we've created. Everything supported by is supported by Bicep, which is very cool. And the authoring experience, we spoke about a simple syntax. So in tools like VS Code, we have IntelliSense, which makes it way too easier to create Bicep files. A Bicep file will look like this. Everything in square brackets is variables or parameters you need to provide based on the resource that you're deploying. So the resource that you see is a way of declaring Azure resource you need for deployment. The resource variable name, just like a variable in the code, but it's not the name of a deployed resource, meaning that you won't see it in Azure Portal. Resource type is the type of resource you're deploying. The version the version to use when deploying those resources. So for an example, storage accounts can have multiple API versions, and normally those API versions have dates, so you can choose which version you would like to use. The name is common, and it is a name that you're going to see when you log into Azure Portal. Some resources needs location, so this is where we're going to specify the Azure region. And different resources or services have different properties, so the list of properties will come in here. Before we switch to Bicep, let's manually create our storage account and container just to give us a feel of what we're trying to achieve. So I'll quickly do that. So coming back to my home, back into my resource groups, you'll see that I don't have any resource group created. So I'll create one. I can click here, or I can click here. Resource group, I'll give it a name. I'll call it resource group party app, and it's in dev 01. And I want my storage account to be in West Europe. Where is West Europe? Perfect, there we go. Next, I can choose the tag. In this case, I'll go with environment, and also my environment is dev. Review and create, and I can create it. Boom, there's my resource group there. Right, then I need to create a storage account. Go into storage account, create a new storage account. I'll choose the resource group, stay by default. I can create a new one. This time I will name it storage account party pictures in dev 01 is my instance, and I'll continue to choose West Europe. Performance, I want to go premium, go with standard, and your redundant storage. Actually, maybe not. Let's go with standard LRS, and we'll see why when you move into the next one. Text, you can choose to tag it again, environment, dev, and the other properties I'll leave them as they are. Perfect. Validation passed. I'm going to create my storage. See, the deployment is in progress. The nice thing about this is I can go out, do whatever I need to do. You can see this progress in notifications, and once it's done, you'll get that notification. So we'll hang in there. Just a couple of seconds, and we should have a storage account. Once we're done with it, we're going to create, boom, there we go. Then we're going to create our container. Go into containers. You can see that we only have the default logs container. I'm going to add a new one, and I'll call it profile pictures. Create, there we go. Then I can start uploading pictures, documents, or whatever I choose to. That's it. Next, we're jumping into doing the same thing but in Bicep. We are now going to create storage account and container using Bicep. But for this exercise, we're going to need VS Code, Azure CLI, Bicep CLI to compile our Bicep files into Bicep VS Code extension, which will help us with IntelliSense. Now to install Azure CLI, just jump into a Microsoft site. Whether you're using Windows, Mac, Linux, you'll find instructions there, and you can install Azure CLI. Bicep CLI, jump into GitHub, and you'll see the instructions of how to install it, whether you're on Windows or in Mac OS. I'll put the links on the description of this video. Now let's jump into our portal, refresh, just to make sure that we only have a party app dev resource group. Now we're going to jump into VS Code, but just to show you, if you go into my extensions and you tap Bicep, you see that I already have Bicep installed there. And I already have on my desktop, I already have an empty folder which my VS Code is pointing to. Now, before we do anything, let's start off by creating a resource group on Azure CLI. Right. So AZ group create my location. I want it in West Europe, and the name of my resource group will be RG Party App. This time I want in test, and it will be 001. Let's go and see. Provisioning state, say succeeded. Going back to the portal, going to refresh. It's not there yet. Eventual consistency, maybe. Let's just wait a while and we'll come back and see if my resource group has been created. In the meantime, we can start off by creating our Bicep file. So I'll create a new file, call it storage. I'll call it party storage. Party storage dot bicep. So dot bicep is very important, and you'll see the minute P, you'll see the bicep here. Press enter. And VS Code is launching my Bicep language service. Very nice, and you'll see the intelligence that comes with it. Loving it. Right, so while it's launching, let's start off by creating our parameters. Param, that's the intelligence coming in. So my application name is Party App. Come on, Party App. And I also have an environment type. Which is also a string, and it'll be test. My last one, my instance, I'll give it a string and is 001. You're welcome to open up VS Code and follow me as I go through this. Now creating my storage account. I'll go resource, I'll call it picture storage. Picture storage, that works. And the minute I click space, you'll see all the services that I can choose from. So I'll go storage, and you can say storage accounts. And the nice thing is, the minute I click space, it gives me the list of available APIs, and which also are on preview. But I'll choose this one simply because I used it before. Welcome to choose any. Right, let's give it a name. Name is resource group, string interpolation, my app name, and now I'll give it the environment, type, and the instance. Coming back to IntelliSense, you will see we get errors and warnings to say this parameter is declared but never used. But the minute I go in, actually good that the warning goes away, which is quite cool. Right, so that's the name of my resource, and then my location. I will give it a resource group dot location, because we're going to create, because the storage is dependent on a resource group, and when we deploy, we'll deploy into a resource group, then I have an opportunity to use the properties of the resource group that I'm deploying into. Right, so that's my location. And then what kind of storage do I want to create? I want to create a storage v2. Again, the power of IntelliSense is quite cool, right? And then my SKU, I'll give it a standard RS. So if you remember, when I created the manual one, I had a choice to choose between premium and standard, decimal plus here. And you'll see back in the days, we'll have to specify a tier to standard. But in this time, because I said standard LRS, tier is a read only, therefore I don't have to specify it. So I'll remove it because I got the warning. Now, if you remember, when we spoke about the template in the introduction of this video, we spoke about properties and different resources having different properties. We'll now jump into storage account properties and what we want to set up there. So minimum TLS version, I would like to go with TLS2. Support HTTPS traffic only, yes, so no HTTP. Access tier, I can choose between cool and hot. I'll go hot for now. Do I need to allow public access? No. Do I want to allow shared case access? No. And there are a lot of properties that you can go in and specify in your Bicep file, which is quite cool. We are now going to create a container. Again, resource. This container will be for my profile pictures, so I'll call it profile container. Remember, this name is not the name that you'll see on the portal, so that is okay. I can name it whatever. And this one is a bit of a dodgy one, so let's see if I can duplicate. So container gives me the container registries and blah 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 blah. It's not too simple, right? So I think I'm looking for something that looks like this. So storage account container blob services, that's correct, and I'll use 2021-0. I think I made a mistake here. Let's go back, change it to cool. We'll test if it works. It's the wrong one. Right. There's my profile container. I'll give it a name. Let's go with picture storage, dot name, and I give it default, and then I'll give it profile pictures. And one of the interesting one, it depends on picture storage. This is important because you can't create a picture storage, you can't create a storage account without a resource group, and you can't create a container without a storage account. Now this depends on, goes back to the storage account to say this must be created before I have my profile picture, a profile container. Perfect. Save my bicep. The nice thing is IntelliSense says there's no errors here. Now I'm going to try and deploy it, but before I do, let's just check if my the resource group that I created is there. Yes, it is there. It's created. Right. Now I'm gonna go into Azure CLI again, and then I'll deploy into a resource group. And in this case, I'm going to create using my file, which is bicep storage. Let's try this, party storage .bicep. And then I'm deploying into my resource group, which is RG party app test. That's 001. Am I correct? Let's go check it again. Yes, it's actually part app. It's not party app. Jeez, spelling. It's okay. Part app. And then I'll click enter. And let's drum roll. Let's drum roll. So RG party app test 1 is not a valid storage name. It's not a valid storage name. What is a valid storage name? Let's see. Yes. Problem. Storage accounts, we can only have lowercase characters. Use numbers and lowercase letters only. So the description is there, and actually named it wrong. It's supposed to be ST instead of RG. I use RG for resource group. Perfect. Let's try again. I didn't save. Oh no. It'll fail. Yes, expected. Let's try again. Things are looking good. Things are looking good. And good news. Provisioning state succeeded in my resource group. Now let's go see if that is true. So I'll go in here, check my storage account. ST party app test 001. It's perfect. Go in here. I'm expecting to see my container. Profile pictures. Perfect. There we go. Simple bicep to create a storage account in a container that looks exactly like this. Now that we are done with our exercise, let's play a bit. Right. So this is the bicep code that we created. Go into Google and then type bicep playground in Azure. Scroll down a bit, it'll take you to bicep demo Z22. Click that. This is going to take time to load, but at the end it looks something like this, basically showing you the bicep file and the template side by side. So I'll delete this and I'll go into my bicep file, go back, paste it, then you can see the 30 lines of bicep files, more readable versus the 53. So it means that the more properties you add, the longer your JSON file can be. Right, let's play even more. So again, coming into my bicep file, I can build my bicep file and convert it to an template. So let's try that. So we'll go AZ bicep build, and I want to build my file, which is party storage.bicep. Let's see. It's coming up, it's coming up, it's coming up, it's coming up. Boom, there we go. So if you go in here, there's your JSON file or your template. So you can choose to copy it and deploy it however you want to, but personally I wouldn't do that. I would go and deploy the bicep as it is. And we can even go to another extent. So let's create a folder. I'm going to call it compiled. We're going to take our JSON and move it there. Yes, I want to move it. It's perfect. Then I want to go into my compiled folder. Now that I'm in there, you can take the existing template and change it to a bicep. But there's a warning there, and you'll see when you try it. Right, so let's go bicep decompile. My file, in this case, is party storage.json. It's not a bicep because I'm inside the compiled folder, and I'm going to this file here. Click enter, and you should see the warning to say, look, the decompilation is a best effort process, and there's no guarantee mapping from JSON to template. So we won't go and compare it, but yeah, during your spare time, you're welcome to jump in. And yeah, so there's a new bicep that's created. Looks pretty clean, but you're more than welcome to go back and play around with this. We are now at the end of episode 1 of our Bicep series. So let's quickly recap. We spoke about infrastructure as code and how it gives us speed, consistency, and productivity. We spoke about Azure Resource Manager. We also touched on templates. We spoke about Bicep and the benefits it gives us, like the simple syntax, the reuse of modules, and the authoring experience that we get out of it. We also created storage account and container manually and using Bicep. So the next episode, which I promise will be shorter because we've done the groundwork, we'll talk about modules, helper functions, outputs, and all the nice things that comes with Bicep. And through that process, we will create other resources using Bicep, incorporating everything that we learn as we move along. So please subscribe to know about the new episodes. Comment, let's have a conversation. We are learning. Azure is new, the services are new. So please comment, let's have a conversation, and share with friends and family. Thank you.